we think about the word adventure when it comes to retirement, what often stops us doing things is the perception that we need to spend elaborate amounts of money and time having these adventures. But here's the thing. Adventures can be small incremental actions you can take, particularly if you're thinking about what happens next, to explore what life might look like in the next 20 to 30 years. So in this video, I want to talk about the 7 mini adventures that you can take today to explore what you might want to do in the next chapter of your life. Welcome to What Happens Next. It's really interesting. In my role as a chartered financial planner and working with clients for the last 20 years, I have a lot of conversation with clients who get to a point where they say to me, is this it? At some point, usually in our 50s or 60s, although for some of us it can be earlier, we find ourselves standing at a crossroads. Things are comfortable enough, familiar enough and safe enough. But we start to wonder, is this it? Now, my experience tells me that might be the signs of the early rumblings that you're getting ready for the next chapter of your life, whatever that might look like for you. And in my work helping people navigate this transition, I've realised something interesting. Most of us don't need another spreadsheet. We don't need another pros and cons list. What we actually need, before we get clarity to what we actually want to do in the next chapter of our lives, is to have a few new experiences, a few new mini adventures that inform us of how we might want to spend our time more meaningfully in the next chapter. For most of us, that's not extreme. It's not the sell everything and trek across Mongolia extreme adventure you're thinking of. It's the kind of adventure that actually allows you to experiment. It's the kind of adventure that allows you to think incrementally and slowly work out what the next chapter of your life might look like. It's the kind of adventure you can enjoy, learn something both about yourself and others from, and get closer to that picture of the ideal next chapter of your life. And today, I'm going to talk about the 7 adventures you might want to consider. Some of these adventures being really super small and simple, some being more elaborate, that you can take to inform the next chapter of your life. Now, let's be clear, you're not going to want to do all of these, but I reckon there's going to be at least 2 that you can think about doing today to inform the next chapter. Let's start with adventure number 1, doing something playful. I wanted to start with a small one, and one that actually we could do really immediately. An adventure we can complete in our gardens or kitchens. And it's embrace childlike, not childish, behaviour. It's about being more playful, more curious, and using our imaginations. In modern Western culture, we often see being childlike and childish as the same thing. And the reality is it's not. Now, if you're like many of us, you've probably developed high levels of both intellectual and emotional maturity over the years, which means you're far from childish. However, embracing play and childlike behaviour, curiosity, that sense of playfulness allows you to do one thing better. Try things that give you a real insight into what fun looks like for you today. That might mean a water fight with the grandkids, or a karaoke night, or a dance in the kitchen. I think the simple adventure of giving ourselves permission to be a bit more playful allows us to do one simple thing. Realise that this next chapter of our lives should be about having more fun. So my first question and challenge for you today is, what's the one thing you can do to be a little bit more playful in your own life right now? Adventure number 2, and I admit this is probably a bit more adventurous than adventure number 1, however it can be as big or as small as you like, is to play or think about playing the Dice Man travel game. In 1971, American novelist George Cockcroft, writing under his pen name Luke Reinhardt, wrote a darkly comic tale about a psychiatrist who made decisions about his life simply by rolling the dice. Now, in this book, the protagonist takes some really dark paths, and whilst I love the book, it does go to some pretty strange places. The book's called The Dice Man, if you've ever heard of it. However, for years, I've thought about the concept of the randomness of the dice to plan a part planned, part random adventure. Now, the idea written in the book is that the dice decides where you want to go. And there was a really interesting Discovery Channel documentary a few years ago now where the concept was used to help somebody choose where they travelled to. Ultimately, the individuals who did the travelling made the decisions about what things should go on the dice. But it really stretched their imagination because they had to pick a couple of things that they knew they could do, but maybe a couple of things that would challenge them and let the dice decide. And I think about travel plans using the randomness of the dice and why it's so attractive. And for me, it stuck with me for two reasons. Firstly, you're ultimately in control. You choose what things you can pick on the dice. So you ultimately know where you're going. And you might put some stuff in there that's super safe, but you also might put some stuff in there that's a little more adventurous and a little more challenging. Secondly, the randomness of the dice means that not every outcome is predetermined. And as I said, there's a brilliant travel show that I've looked for online and I can't find anywhere, but there's a really interesting website that talks about the show called diceman.co.uk, where two guys went on a trip and just used the dice to determine where they went. Interestingly, I think using the dice as a basis to travel will definitely take you on some trips you're not expecting and definitely build memories you're unlikely ever to forget. Now, you might choose to start with something simple. Maybe on the dice you'll put 6 coastal towns and the dice decides what coastal town you're going to visit to next. You might pick 6 local eateries you haven't tried before on the dice and let the dice decide where you're going for lunch. Or if you're feeling a load more adventurous, you might put 6 international trips on the dice and actually let the dice determine where you want to go. Either way, letting the dice decide might lead to the next adventure for you, big or small, and add some excitement and spontaneity into your life. If the dice is too much of a stretch, and I completely get why it might be, let's head back to the simple adventure which we can do to inform our futures today. And that is number 3. Try a completely new physical activity. Now, recently I've been spending a lot of time with a guy named Tony. Tony is 76 and he's recently, last year, taken up paddle tennis. And if you're a regular viewer of this channel, you'll know that I love a bit of paddle tennis at the minute. I've been playing for about a year. And it really fascinates me when I think about the desire to start a new sport or activity slightly later in life. And there's nothing stopping us trying these new things. Paddleboarding, tai chi, walking football, salsa dancing, cold water swimming, although that last one's definitely not for me. We talk a lot on What Happens Next about how important our physical well-being and in turn our physical activity is. And a new next chapter adventure might be about trying something new that moves our body in a way that helps us maintain physical well-being for longer. Tip number 4 is trying a 30-day adventure to being better than you were before at one particular skill. I'd recommend choosing one skill that you've always admired but never tried. That might be calligraphy or playing the piano or sketching. It might be carpentry, photography or cocktail making. And the goal here isn't to perfect anything. It's just to be better than you were before and good enough to impress you 30 days ago in terms of the progress you made. You don't want to be excellent in 30 days. You don't want to be an expert. You just want to be better than you were and make an incremental improvement that you can see. I love the idea of micro mastery, that small steps, because my experience in life, and maybe yours too, is micro mastery compounds over time. After decades and decades of being highly competent in your work, returning to be a beginner in anything rewires your identity in surprising ways. You remember what learning feels like. You rediscover the pleasure of progress. You might find that a month of deliberate curiosity, continued growth and learning changes how confident you feel about taking on bigger challenges. For my next adventure, I want to talk to you about something a client did that he absolutely loved. And I was out for lunch with this particular client, and he spent the entire lunch telling me this story. A couple of years ago, he wanted, now he had a bit more time on his hands, to find out a bit more about his family history. He was from Ireland originally and wanted to find out a little bit more. But there was a problem. The information he had about the generation before his mum and dad, and every generation before that, was a little bit vague. As I say, they came from Ireland, a little village in Ireland, but they had very little information more than that. However, he decided with his sister and brother-in-law to take a trip to this little village to learn more. What resulted is a story that took about an hour and a half for him to tell me, but a really twisty, turny adventure with a few dead ends, but where he, at the end, he found out so much more about his family and extended family from a lady who lived in the most remote house on a cliff in the village. And he met that lady by a chance, which resulted in him visiting the house that his dad was brought up in as a small child. Now, when my client was telling me this story, his eyes were lighting up. You could tell that he loved the experience. It provided him with an opportunity to learn something new about the people he cared about the most, but also have some unique adventures along the way. So if it's your thing, would you want to explore a bit more about your family history, and might travel play a part in that? Where could you go to learn and understand a bit more about the people you love the most and the people who love them? My next tip is to consider a reverse gap year. Most people think about a gap year as a young person's game. Often work out in your late teens and early 20s what the next stage is for those people in that aspect of their lives. But when we approach our 50s and 60s, we're in a similar sort of what happens next transition. And I reckon that's a great opportunity to have a gap year adventure whilst working out the details of what you want for the next 20 to 30 years. Now, you could use that year to go travelling, to prototype a couple of lives to see what one you want to incorporate in your next chapter, or to focus on a creative project. All these options are available, but thinking about taking the year to explore what you truly want to do next might be one of the greatest adventures you can take. Number 7, and this one might be quite popular, is to have more lunches and dinners where the desire is not only to enjoy the lunch, but to gain insight into the next chapter of your life. There's a long tradition of people using dinner tables as opportunities for learning. You have conversations over dinner, I find, that are different to in a work environment or anywhere else. Whether it's those structured mastermind dinners popularised by business owners and popular in entrepreneurial circles, or just the long-running experiments of hosts getting together a bunch of strangers around purposeful questions, the guiding principles are the same. Who you spend time with can shape how you think. A well-curated dinner cuts through the small talk and routine. It gives you access to perspectives, stories and lived experiences you might not encounter in your normal social circle. When you're contemplating the next chapter of your life, this can be invaluable. You're not always seeking advice, but having a different perspective and a different worldview might give you fresh insight in terms of what you want to do. What makes these dinners especially powerful during your what happens next phase is they allow you to step outside the echo chamber of your own assumptions. You're simply exposing yourself to New ideas, new models of living, fresh ways of thinking about time, purpose, identity and freedom. My perspective is many people walk away from conversations over dinner with people who give them the fresh perspective they need with one thing: permission to try something different, to slow down, to redirect, or potentially to dream bigger. It's a reminder that working out what happens next is not one and done, and not something you do on your own. It's something where you can share ideas with others and inspire yourself to do what's right for you. So there's 7 slightly strange and interesting adventures designed to inspire you if you're thinking about the next chapter of your life. If reading this has sparked a few ideas, then now is the perfect moment to take the next small step. We've designed a quiz on the What Happens Next website, which is a quick evidence-based assessment to look at where you are from a holistic wellbeing perspective as you approach this chapter of your life. There's a link in the comments. You can take the quiz for absolutely free, or take a photo if you're watching this on the TV and you've got your phone in your hand. Take a photo of the QR code below and it will take you straight to the quiz that you can do. Or if you'd like to stay connected, I'm just literally sending the What Happens Next book to the publishers. That will be out sort of start of quarter 2 2026. Again, link in the comments if you want to sign up for the waiting list for the book with thousands of other people who have joined us in that journey, or click the QR code below and you can make sure that you are on that waiting list for the book. Either way, there's a couple of opportunities there for free to help you navigate that next chapter. Now, we've got a bunch of videos on what happens next that should be able to give you a bit more inspiration. And I'd suggest that if as we're talking about travel a lot in this video, here's a video talking about the travel adventures you might want to consider in the next chapter of your life. And interestingly, a lot of these adventures are about shifting our mindset and thinking about mindset in the next chapter of our lives. And this video talks all about growth mindset and why it's so important. Hopefully that's useful. Have a lovely day and we'll see you in the journal soon.